Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome back or welcome for the first time to our mental health webinar series. Today we have Colleen Gildea, an old friend of mine and someone who I lean on all the time. And for someone who has had patients whom I adore over the years, having someone like Colleen to refer to, and we'll get into what her work is here, has been profound. It matters so much to know as a physician or as a family member or as a friend or whatever else um, that people are going to be well cared for and loved on and touched and held. And that is so much of what Colleen does. So, Colleen, I'll cut over to you in a second, my friend. But first of all, just welcome. Thank you very much for being here and
Thank
for
you.
work. Um, okay, and guys out in the audience, real quick sort of level setting here for how these work. Colleen and I will go through some basic slides to get, some general stuff out there and to prime the pump, as it were. But then the real fun is when we all talk and questions and comments and this is really sort of a group conversation much more than a lecture. The only really rules are just kindness and respect for yourself and others. Otherwise, this is, as we say, a safe space here. So there's some mechanics around how to participate. So let me cut over to you, Sons.
Thank you, BJ, and thanks everyone for being here. So, as BJ mentioned, he and Colleen are going to go through some slides, do some level setting, and then we get to the good part, which is speaking with you and answering your questions. And you can do this in two ways. You can click the raise hand button, and I will unmute you, and you can chat with both of them. And if you'd prefer to not do that, you can type your question into the Q&A box, and I will read it aloud for you. The chat is also open, so please feel free to put any thoughts in there as we go along and you want to respond to that. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Sons. Okay. All right, Colleen. Shall we jump in?
Yes, please.
All right. Well, my friend, why don't you tell us a little bit about the background of what you do? And that can help set the table for us all too about the talk today.
Okay, great. I have an in-home care agency called Little Bit of Help, and I've been involved in caregiving for probably about 18 years. They just keep piling up these years. I started out doing caregiving myself, and then I found that so many people needed help arranging things and doing 24-hour care that I then established a business, and I've been doing that ever since. So I love the work. I just think I really like making people's lives better, and especially the end of life. I think it should be wonderful and as with as little pain as possible.
Amen, sister. And let me just fill in a few blanks for folks out there in case some of this language is novel to you. So from the professional point of view, sometimes there's conversation around a direct care workforce, and sometimes that language is meant to mean certified nursing assistants in the hospital or healthcare setting. But at home, that usually is a home health aide. Um, and so when we say the word aides here, are we generally meaning home health aides, Colleen? Is that synonymous aides and home health aides from where you sit?
Yes, it would be. Yeah, caregiver, home health aide. Yeah.
Yeah. So you'll hear us usually say exactly as Colleen just said. Caregiver, home health aide. Sometimes you hear the word personal care attendant or attendant. These all, I think, are in the ballpark of what we're talking about here. This is a professional caregiving service, and in this case, meted out in the home. And so, all right, so just a little background on what exactly some of the lingo. Um, but let's start here, Colleen. So, a big question that comes up, of course, all the time is when is it time to call in help? When is it time to call someone like you?
Well, I named the business Little Bit of Help because people don't think they ever need help. The majority, I should say, the majority of people are, I'm fine. I don't really need any help. So my thinking is that the sooner you can start to introduce assistance or help, the better. And it doesn't have to be professional caregivers. I know a lot of family members act as caregivers and start to provide the help. But maybe you get a friend of yours to come over and help, and just start to introduce the idea that assistance is good, and
Mm.
getting used to getting help. And yeah, I one of my favorite things to do is sometimes just add a cleaning lady, because that helps in a huge way, when you're starting to go into decline or you just can't keep up with things.
Right on. And I think what you're pointing to, among other things, is sort of maybe it's a human thing, maybe it's an American thing, maybe who knows what, but asking for help is tricky, and few of us are smooth at it. And I think a lot of us wait till all sorts of things are hitting the fan before we'll accept help. And I guess one of the things I hear you saying, and I've seen you do, and we try to think of on behalf of our clients, is how to kind of ease into this, how to crack the plane of this sort of vaunted independence that we so prize and around. So when do we, sort of how to ease into accepting and even asking for help? And to your point there, it doesn't need to be a professional service per se, friends, neighbors, family members, etc. So you can kind of, like you say, crack the plane with a cleaning lady. Just get used to the idea that you're not alone in all this, and getting and receiving help. So that's not as easy as it sounds. I just want to sort of highlight what you're saying there. And again, most of us wait too long. And I'm assuming from what I think I know your answer to this question, but like when in doubt, maybe just call you or a home health agency in general, just to begin the process of getting a sense of what's possible before maybe even enlisting the service per se. Does that make sense? Do you appreciate getting a call from someone as a potential client and they're just trying to get a feel for how it could work?
Very much so. I've seen the process hundreds and hundreds of times now, whereas most people only have so many sets of parents. So going through it for the first time, you don't necessarily know what to expect, and you don't even know what you're seeing. Um, One of my favorite stories was one week, two different people called. Their mothers had lost 10 pounds and they didn't know what was going on. And we got some little caregivers in there. It turns out they were just forgetting to eat. And
Mm.
so it's like, with that help starting, we solved that problem,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
yeah.
Right on.
I
Okay.
love, and so yes, I love the calls, and I love hearing everybody's individual things, and there are so many solutions.
Mhm. Right on. And there's also, as I see that word long-term care here, I mean, there are long-term care settings. There's also long-term care insurance. Is it now a good time to mention how some of these services may be paid for?
Yes. Care is actually very expensive, and so it's really good to think about early on. Many people in the current generation receiving care, maybe between their 80s and 100s, have got long-term care policies, and they're really great policies. And those policies, you have to have a certain amount of need. I think it's three or four activities of daily living where you're unable to take care of yourself. So then they'll pay so much a day for you to have care, and there's usually a cap on it. And there's a great deal of paperwork involved with that. So if you have someone in the family that's good at paperwork, you put them on that, and you should find out if your person has long-term care insurance, because I've also discovered, down the line, they'll say, "Oh, well, I have long-term care insurance." It's like, well, we should have been using it for the past 2 years, so just know what's going on there. And well, I will say the nice thing about my company is we figured out how to submit all the paperwork on a weekly basis, because when you need help, very often you don't have the bandwidth to do a lot of paperwork.
Mhm. Well, that's great to hear. What a
Hmm.
service. Right on. Okay. And because this can get expensive, as you said. So, and you kind of have to pace yourself. I mean, a lot of us or will die from chronic illness. Most of us will spend a fair amount of time with some amount of debility and therefore some amount of dependency and need for help. So a lot of this ends up being something of a marathon versus a sprint, as it were. So I guess I'm noting a little tension there. On the one hand, you and I would say, from just a sanity point of view and a staying safe and comfortable and point of view, earlier is better. Don't wait to the calamity to get help. But from the other direction, the costs do add up over time, and so there's a tension there to be cognizant of. Just to name it in case you in the audience are hearing us say sort of two different things that conflict. Okay, well, one other thing on this note before we get off here onto the next slide is this notion of role changes. So just thinking things through of like, why don't people reach out for help? I mean, that's its own talk. We could spend hours on that, sort of the psychology of that. But one sort of another note here that sometimes comes up for family members is, as whether you're a spouse or a sibling or a friend or whatever else, one of the ideas, of course, is to protect the sanctity of that relationship. And as care needs go up, it's very common for someone for a spouse, say, to become something of a nurse. You take on all these roles, and it can be very difficult over time as a caregiver, but it can shift the dynamics of your relationship. And again, there's so much to talk about here. I didn't know if you have a comment or two there. We can move off this slide. But again, I just want to name this sort of phenomenon of moving through care, whether you're receiving it or giving it, can kind of stress and strain the nature of your dynamic, of your relationship. And that's totally normal, but it also might be a sign for when to call someone like you, is when you're becoming more nurse than spouse. That may be a note it's time to call. And last thought, before I cut it over to you for any other thoughts, would be, the needs of the patient, of course, lead the charge in so many ways. But as we know, we move through illness as a team, as a family, as a group in many ways, as a community in many ways. So maybe in some ways at home, the patient is doing well, thanks to all this care from family. But it's the family who may be cracking at the seams, and their needs may be the thing that ultimately sparks the call to someone like you. So a couple thoughts there.
Right, I agree. And I think that the one thing I see quite often is when you have a couple and one person in the couple is taking care of the other. And you'll find I've seen that the caregiver in this case, and using that term, the family caregiver is is exhausted, is frustrated, will get sick, will, if they don't take care of themselves. And it's caregiving is a really hard job, and especially when you're so enmeshed. And then with the bigger family, like daughters coming in or sons and grandchildren, whatever, yeah, you lose that special. It's not like, oh, I'm going out with my daughter or we're hanging out. It's like, oh, she's coming over to take care of me. And, oh, I've got to do these things for my mother. And it gets exhausting. And I think that's probably a really great time to just insert a little bit of care, maybe 4 hours twice a week or even once a week where you get a break and you know that your person's cared for.
Right on. What is the minimum, by the way? What is the minimum is it a minimum number of hours per day or per week?
It's 4 hours a shift. So, and that could be once a week. It could be every day. It could be in the morning and in the evening. So, but a
Gotcha.
4 hour shift is the minimum of any agency I know of.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, shall we move on to the next slide, my friend?
Sure.
Okay. So we've touched on this a little bit about our
We did.
weirdness about receiving help and asking for it. And in so many ways, it's been how you're wired, but in so many ways, giving care sometimes feels easier than receiving the stuff. But any tips from your experience? Again, I think we've noted the issue. Maybe we don't need to belabor it, but any tips from your point of view here, how to nurture folks along into the idea of receiving help?
Well, we've kind of already discussed baby steps, a 4-hour shift here or things like that. Um, Very often, people will accept care if they think they're helping you.
Mhm.
So if you're the exhausted caregiver and you need help, the person that's getting the care might agree because
Mm.
they'll do it for you, but they won't do it for themselves. So I often find that that will work. And it's true, it's not like you're duping anybody. You're just telling the truth. You need help so that you can actually do the best care for your person. Um, Other than that, maybe doctors saying something actually it can be very helpful because if a doctor said you have to have help, you have to have care, people will do it because I see that all the time. For some reason, people really think doctors know what they're talking about.
Why do they still think that, Colleen? That is so odd, but okay. I
But
take
yeah, it's
the
like,
point.
oh, the doctor said. And I mean, I use that too. I'm like, well, the doctor said, we can't have any of that. So we're not going to have any of that.
Uh,
So
right on. I think that's a really good tip. That doctors, for whatever reason, better and worse, historical or otherwise, and it is fraying. It does feel on some level, but there is some authority, perhaps, or when the doctor says it, sometimes it says anything, it takes on next level significance. In my experience, certainly, oftentimes for people of different generations, earlier generations, there are some folks for whom the word of the doctor is sort of from on high. And
exactly.
we can we can rebut the wisdom of that point of view, but the bottom line is one way or another, a family member can sometimes enlist the help of his doctor at a doctor's visits. Prime the doctor.
Mhm.
Hey, doc, is now a good time for help in the house? You can help kind of enlist the physician's authority to point you in this direction. I will say that in my experience, a lot of doctors won't even they will need that prompting. They may not think about the world outside of their office often. So with a little priming from the family members, that this can be a sort of a strategic way to get help happening.
Agreed. And it really very often will work because you're trusting, if you have your doctor and you're trusting them to direct your health and your wellness, then when they tell you something, you might just act on it. A lot of
Right.
people do.
Feels more like almost like a prescription.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, let's see what else. Wait. Okay. So again, here I always do this. I sort of touch on everything real fast, and then we kind of go backwards into it. But maybe a little bit. Is there anything more to say about the mechanics of hiring aides? There's a lot of informal care happening. There are agencies like yours.
Mhm.
Maybe we could spend a minute on that. So the difference of when, kind of word of mouth. There are certain cultures that often put themselves out in the world around the act of caregiving. And I often hear in my community news of sort of under the table talk of, oh, this person or this family can be hired to help out in the home as an aide, but it's not formalized per se and often paid cash under the table, etc. So maybe it can help the audience understand how to think of these sort of volunteers versus paid caregivers, and maybe more to the point, working with an agency per se versus just finding an individual in the community.
Right. Well, I really love the idea of utilizing your community. So, if you can use other people's experience, it's really helpful. So you should talk to your friends that you know have been doing care, getting care, or utilizing care. Um, and I think of things like, well, I said the cleaning lady because I love my cleaning lady, but also your neighbors. Maybe there's a high school person, a kid that
Mm.
would, run some errands or come and just check in every afternoon after school. And probably a high school kid, you're going to want to give them a little money to do that. Um, but then your friends who, know your mother really well, or her friends even, I'm just going to use a mother as an example here, but they they might be more than happy to come and have lunch with your mom every other week or whenever, and
Mhm.
check things out and help her out with things, or you might have a friend that will take them to a doctor. So that's where you can get people to volunteer, and people do like to be helpful, and if a lot of people have people that love them and would be more than happy to come. Um, the thing is that if you have volunteers, they are just that. And anyone that's arranged volunteer groups or done things with volunteers knows that they don't have to do anything. So they make a commitment, but very
Yeah.
often they can't keep it. So that's where I guess the reliability would come in. When you start to need a lot of care and you need regular care and a lot of care, then that's when I would definitely move on to an agency, whether it's a licensed agency or you find it, on Next Door Neighbor or someplace else. You might find a caregiver where you make an arrangement with them and you have clear arrangement about what they're doing, what they're being paid, when they're doing it, who they're reporting to, and all those things, so that there's a real feeling of there's some control, and there's you can depend on it, because I
Mhm.
think that's really important for the family member or the person getting the care, that they know they're going to have that help.
And just help us understand, all makes good sense. Help us understand why lean on an agency versus what does an agency um provide that an individual for hire in the community may not, or help us understand why go through an agency.
Okay, well, excuse me.
Mhm.
An agency, well, first of all, an agency is going to be registered with the state or licensed by the state. So they've done all the paperwork and the states check them out, and we're all fingerprinted, and we're approved. There's so many requirements that go to being an agency that I have to hire all my caregivers. So they're not, so they're hired by me. I pay all their taxes. I pay them. So you don't have to worry about any of that.
Mhm.
Because legally, when you use somebody like a caregiver, you're supposed to hire them, even as an individual or a family, and then do their payroll and taxes. And some people, I've seen people do it where they're very, very good at that and very strict about it, and others could care less and do it under the table because they're just not worried about that law being enforced. Um, so another big thing is that we provide workman's comp for our people. And
Mhm.
so that's really important. So if someone
Oh,
falls
yeah.
in your house or something happens, it's not on you, it's on us. So that's huge, just because you don't want to be sued, and you have your home, or you have whatever you have that you want to keep. So
Mhm.
that would be another big piece. And scheduling. Scheduling, if you have a lot of care, scheduling is not easy. You have a lot of moving pieces that are, someone gets sick, this happens, that happens. So there's a real art to scheduling.
Mhm.
And if you don't, yeah, a lot of people don't have the time or the skill to do it. So that's when an agency would be really handy.
Beautiful. That's a pretty robust list. I think it's also true too that there's some amazing, as you and I know, there's some amazing human beings in the world, and they don't always have a big sign up saying, "Hey, hire me or work with me." But so you can find individuals in the world can do really wonderful things and to be trusted, etc. Um, and in my experience too, there's a little, maybe another thing on the list of why to reach out to an agency like yours is, besides all the logistical support that you've named, is you've vetted them,
Mhm.
and that also seems to me potentially wonderful. I want to be careful. There are wonderful individuals, again, in the world ready to be hired and will do great work for you. But then it's on you as the person to vet them, check their references, etc. And it can be a little bit of a crapshoot. So my sense, and to add to your list, is that by working with an agency like yours, you are going to be getting caregivers who have been tested and observed and vetted in terms of their quality and their attitude, et cetera. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, very fair. And the other thing too is that the fit, because we have our caregivers and we know what they're good at, because everybody's got their high points and their real skills.
Yeah.
You want to put the right caregiver with the right client. And I don't know, one of my company philosophies is like if you take care of your caregivers and you take care of your clients, you everybody's happy, and what could be better than that? Um, because you have someone coming into your life. It's very personal. Someone coming into your space, all these things, and it needs to be the right person, someone that you click with, that you feel good about.
On that note, gosh, you're right. And we've been in situations together where the caregiver might be a wonderful provider. I mean, there's nothing, they're not doing anything wrong. But to your point, the personality fit may not be quite right. And in your case, like all we just need to let you know that, and then you kind of rematch, right? I mean, that's a that can relieve patient and family of having very awkward or difficult conversations too. So I can't say enough about this last point, especially when there's an agency that you trust. Like working with you is very different from reaching out to the yellow pages of other agencies. I mean, I trust you and we've worked together. So just because it's an agency and certified, just like in nursing homes, doesn't mean they're amazing per se. And just because someone isn't in an agency doesn't mean they're not amazing per se. But in your case, what's been so lovely is I, as a provider, and patient, and I get to know you, and then I can trust you to make a lot of judgment calls on our behalf, which is a little bit more one-stop shop. And for an exhausted situation at home, that can be extremely helpful. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you. And also, yeah, well, and I love too that then I can also reach back to you just to give you little updates, and then, we can that kind of that care that really encompasses the client and gets them the very best of everything.
Right on. Oh, so beautiful. Okay, Colleen, let's see here. Let's see. What else do we have here?
Hmm.
Yeah, so you mentioned a little earlier, ADLs, activities of daily living. Which just quick primer for folks, those are sort of the basics of daily life, like grooming, bathing, eating. What else is on that list?
Cleaning, shopping.
Yeah.
Uh, oh no, I don't remember. No, just kidding.
There's some official language around ADLs for insurance purposes, but for our purposes,
Definitely.
it's basically the what as it says, the activities of daily life, the logistics, the basics.
Whatever it takes to get you through the day. So
Yeah.
that, that starts with getting you out of bed and, helping you get washed up and dressed, and then breakfast and cleaning up after breakfast, and maybe getting to the chair where you really like to be to do your reading or your TV or any of those things. Even walking the dog falls into activities of daily living for a caregiver. The insurance company doesn't buy that one too much, but yeah, so and then, as I said, all the way through the day, repeat, meal after meal, and then getting ready for bed, reminders about medication.
Mm.
Um, yeah, all the fun things.
Can that's on the medication note, Colleen. Like I think just from legally, aides cannot dispense meds, all right, but can they help you organize your meds and make sure you've taken them? Where is the line there?
The line is really they really shouldn't be organizing your medications. The family should really do that.
Okay,
Um, Uh, or a nurse in some cases in hospice situations, well, the nurses will set it up and then the caregivers can remind and give it as directed.
okay,
So yeah, we're just there to help. We
gotcha,
can't, yeah, we can't
right,
really get into your meds.
gotcha. Okay, that's really helpful to know. But you can point to the meds, say, "Hey, Mrs. Jones, did you take your meds?" It's
Right,
time.
yeah. And here are your meds. You can even, yeah, you can give them the meds from the set. But
Got
yeah,
it.
you remind them.
Okay. Well, so there's all sorts of, so there's a lot of things that aids can help with. Maybe another way to come at this too, like where are, like we just did with medications, where are there bright lines of what aids cannot do and should not do? Where's that? Is there a clear delineation somewhere with things, a no-go zones?
Well, the medical, anything medical. So, yeah, if it's something a nurse should be doing, then a nurse should be doing it. You should not be doing it. Um, you know, you can put on Band-Aids and help change them and things that, you would do that just as normal activities of daily living. Um, but yeah, but you don't want to be doing like wound care. It's just things like that.
Okay. So most of the bright lines are around this sort of medical delineation.
Right.
But
The only other line I can think of is that a caregiver can't force somebody to do something because sometimes family will be, why didn't you make her do it? It's like, well, because she said
mm,
no. And, there's that you, you can talk, you can do a lot to cajole and talk someone into doing things, but you can't force somebody to do something.
right on. Okay. Super helpful. But it's okay to say, hey, can you wash the dishes? Or, that's not off, something
Oh,
he's doing in the house.
oh, well, yeah, the person that's getting the care can ask the caregiver to do
Yeah.
whatever they want and they can say yes or no. I meant you can't force the client or the
Yes.
patient
Yeah.
to do
I get you.
anything.
Sorry, no, to be clear, I was moving on to just a separate.
Okay, you're okay, good. I was gonna say, yeah, boss
Bring it.
that caregiver around. No.
Yeah. Okay. All right. But otherwise, in basic when in doubt, in terms of from coaching a patient or family, ask the aide what they can do, and feel free to ask. The aide may
Mhm.
have to say, "No, I'm so sorry, I can't do X, Y, or Z." But I guess when in doubt, ask. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. All right. Anything more to add to this note here? Um,
Uh, no, I don't think so.
okay. Let's keep on trucking. So here again, we mentioned a little bit about this.
We
Uh,
did.
Yeah, is there it's sort of, are there other notes of how to coach a client, a patient or family member? Um, I think I hear myself when I'm in a position to be pointing people to working with aides, um, just to remind them that this is a professional relationship, but it's a human relationship. And as you noted earlier, this is intimacy. This is they're helping with bathing, they're coming into your home. So it is no matter how you slice it, the intimacy is very real. Vulnerability is very real. And sometimes I know that on a patient point of view, there's a helplessness and you sometimes feel like you just got to take any help that's coming. But maybe as you pointed us, we can lift our sights a little higher, that really the point is not just to draw another breath or get through the day, but these are real human relationships that in themselves can be meaningful or powerful. So I suppose the one note here is to, as a family member or patient, to yes, ask for what you want and need. It may take cycling through a couple different caregivers to find the right match. But I guess what we're saying here is keep your sights a little higher beyond just accepting anything that comes your way, because you're in need. I think that I often find people kind of collapsing under the weight of their need, and they forget to consider the other aspects of being a human being, these relational aspects. So anyway, anything else to add to this note?
Um, well, we talked about the chemistry and boundaries pretty much. Communication is everything. And I think just even how you speak to one another, it's very important because another thing is that when you're getting help, you often want something done a very specific way, and people will usually try to do that, but it might require more patience than you actually have if you're under the weight of needing the help. But if there's any way to just back up and be kind, I think kindness is always the answer in my mind. If everybody's kind to one another, things go pretty well.
Right on. I'm with you there. And man, communication is of that's not the sort of uber skill of all skills. And as good communication hygiene as you're saying, that goes both directions. That being willing to ask for what you need and state your wishes and state your hopes, etc. But also the caregiver is also a human being with limitations and needs and etc. So there's a note for us to both speak up as well as to listen in both directions.
Exactly. And one other piece of communication nowadays is when you are dealing with family members, the caregiver, the company, and the client, um, we've found group text might help, some way
Hmm.
to keep everybody informed,
Hmm.
because especially in evolving situations, it's like you come and you come to the shift and things have changed. If you see the notes, you're aware of that. And the family can, it just kind of works. Group texts work pretty well. The having the book in the home so that you
Hmm.
can see what, the caregiver's notes are in there. You can see what's happened, and
Hmm.
because it can be tricky, when to keep everybody informed.
So that book of notes, is there typically that you will actually there'll be a binder or a pa piece of paper and aides will have kept notes or you're saying the family member should keep notes along the way? Or
Um, you actually both. If you have a family member that comes in and they are doing something or wanted the caregiver to do something, they can note it in the book. But yeah, that's usually there's a book there
ah,
where you can flip through. It's always there's always the notion it should be online and then everybody could just look at it. But it's like it's trickier than you think
yeah,
because everybody's got different levels of skills or computers or not computers or
got
tablets or whatever. So
it.
the written paper is really a great thing to have.
Okay, beautiful. Okay. Well, here too, we've hit on this.
Oh, we covered that.
But it really is a very, it's a beautiful, I mean, it's hard, right? I mean, no one wants to be in this, I guess. It's hard to be in this situation as a patient or a family member. There's a lot of hardness there, difficulty, just implicitly and inherently. And like we keep pointing, there's also a lot of life in there, a lot of intimacy and a lot of sweetness and tenderness. And so I think just keeping your eye on the relational dynamic versus the sort of the transactional pieces per se. Transactional stuff's in there too. But just you keep that high bar of human relationships and the kindness and communication skills that you're noting, and things can work really well. So,
Yeah. It can be, yeah, so well, because you have someone in there in an intimate setting with you, and then it goes on over time. You become pretty close. I mean,
yeah,
I had so many clients that their stories still touch my heart. I love them, and you do kind of fall in love, and makes
yeah,
care much easier, actually.
yeah. Well, amen. And you're also reminding me, like, these relationships come to an end for one reason or another. Just reminding myself as you're talking, for your sake and the aides that you work with, when these relationships end, just a kind of a side note, how do you as an organization process that? How do you guys on your end deal with the end of a relationship, whether by death or it's terminated or whatever else?
Right. Sorry, my mind just went to the one you're like, thank God they're gone. No,
Yeah,
but
those two.
the um
Right
the
on.
the one that's never happy, which since I'm looking for happy, that kind of drives me crazy. But it can be very hard to lose a long-term client that you've grown very fond of, and very often, my caregivers will take a break
Mm,
after when someone dies or someone they're really close to that dies, and they've been, very often if you're there for the end of their life and you're, helping them through that, it's exhausting and it's an honor. It's so many things. You have so many feelings, so
mm,
you need to kind of process those and. Um, I guess the one thing I've learned is everybody processes it in their own way.
mm.
It's amazing to me how, one person will not want to talk about it, leave it alone, and someone else is gushing and telling you everything under the sun. So, yeah,
Mm.
it's I
Yeah.
guess it's as diverse as the people involved.
Yeah. Well, a special note, whether for you or the aides you work with or family members or friends, the caregiving, the act, the craft of caregiving is that it's a craft. It's a beautiful and difficult thing. And a lot of feelings go with it. And it's not just a job, no matter how you slice it. And so it's just a sweet note that caregivers too have feelings, you know, and caregivers grieve. Physicians too when we lose patients. So
Yeah.
good old human relations. Okay, well, let's see what I think. Yeah, let's see. I think that is it on the slide. So now, my friend, thank you, Colleen. That was really helpful and kind. So now let's cut to whatever's going on in the audience.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, we have some questions, and actually, I'm gonna ask a question first. So, one of the things that we've heard from our clients at Mettle over the years is, how do I deal with a difficult situation? We hired someone, they're coming in and we had a disagreement about something, or I don't like the way that this is being done. I'm wondering if you can touch on, we've talked a lot about the goodness and how do we counsel people to getting through kind of the tougher moments where there is a little bit of friction because you do have someone new coming into your home, into your space.
Um, well, well, hmm, the one nice thing about an agency is literally in that case, you would call me and I would take care of that for you. I would deal with that issue. Even if we wanted to keep them, sometimes there's just something that needs to be adjusted or they just need to go. Um, if you're doing it yourself, then I think an important thing to think about there is who's making that decision and who's talking to who, because you can get a lot of people involved and it can get very messy. But if you listen carefully to the person getting the care and then you act on that, say, to either have a certain behavior stop um, or just to say, sorry, we don't want you anymore, I think that guess maybe one way to look at it is you don't have to explain to somebody when you want to end the service.
Mhm.
You are hiring this person, and so therefore you can fire this person or let them go, whatever sounds better to you. But it can be really tough, and if they're really entrenched, it can be very difficult. But you have to just be clear and I guess be clear,
Mhm.
know what you want.
Mhm. And I hear that as another, among other things, as another note of what the strengths of working with an agency, where there's help kind of navigating the firing and hiring or changing out the person or um, arbitrating or what's the word, mediating between a disagreement or a miscommunication. Maybe another reason that's the fuller suite of service of working with an agency versus hiring an individual in the community.
It's true. And, as we were saying, the caregiver, the individual you have has a life and things happen to them. And all of a sudden they're not very good. They were great and then they're not good. It's like, what's going on? I do see that where you go, oh, this caregiver needs a break or,
Mhm.
or for their own personal reasons or whatever else.
Mhm.
Hmm. Thank you. Okay, we've got quite a few questions, as I suspected we would. So the first one came from Rebecca, and she says, does any insurance cover or supplement the cost of aids at all?
Long-term care and really not
Good.
much else. If you have low income, you can do IHSS, in-home social services, and they will provide stipends or actually, yeah, they will pay money, but there really isn't a lot.
Correct.
Well, and I say that, but I mean, if you just have to get really good at looking at all the government agencies and seeing where you might fit in and why. And if there are the Veteran Administration might give you a few thousand a year, or they'll give you money to alter your home so you can stay in your home. So that definitely worth checking into that.
Great. Colleen, we've gotten this question a couple times. What service areas does your agency cover, or geographically?
We cover from Santa Rosa to Sausalito, and then we've been branching out into the East Bay a little bit into Berkeley and Richmond and Berkeley.
Great, thank you. Okay, getting to some other questions. Jeannie asked, what are privacy concerns for caregivers when there are cameras in the home?
Yeah. Um, well, it's interesting because we've had that with a few people, and you just do your work because I guess you could object, but usually we're assuming that the cameras are there to make sure the person's okay, which is a good reason to have them there. So, what would I say? I would say I used to think about like when I was doing, one day I was mowing the lawn and I thought, this little group walked by and I noticed I was standing up a little taller and mowing a little straighter. And I thought, I just need like someone to follow me around and good job, Colleen, go, go. So maybe you can think of it like that. Like you might have a little supervision that's pushing you to be a little bit better. But yeah. And I haven't had any caregivers that wouldn't do the work in a home because it had cameras.
On that note, is there any reason, I think I know the answer, but could a caregiver, does a caregiver, I mean, a patient doesn't have to have a need to hire, has an explanation or an excuse to hire or fire per se. Does a caregiver, any caregiver can say no and to an employment, right? And
Hmm.
probably obvious enough, but yeah, everyone gets to say no.
Everyone gets to say no. And no, and caregivers always want to know what does this client need? Can I provide it? And we have caregivers who are really wonderful at driving people to appointments and being a companion and cooking and this and that, but they're terrible. They're like, I don't really want to touch their bodies. I'm like, how can you be a caregiver? But they are. So yeah.
Right on. Okay.
Okay, next question is from Sarah Ann. She said, it's a two-parter, so I'll do first one here. Would you be kind enough to speak to the importance of screening caregivers and what sorts of things one should be looking for when screening caregivers?
Well, you definitely one of the most important things, or two, I would say kindness and patience. So when you're talking to somebody, if you have a good sense of people, engage them in a conversation, see what they think about a range of things and how they respond to questions. You really kind of have to go with your gut on that. But then you should check out references because, you know, I think anybody that's used a caregiver would want to give an honest reference because they know the situation you're in. You know, you need help. So I would really follow up on the references and I don't know, I guess those are the big things. You can also have a background check done where they go in and get fingerprinted so that you're secure in knowing they're not criminals. Um, and I think those are the major things I think of. And also when you're interviewing, if you click with them, that's a very good sign, right? Because some people you talk to and you're like, oh, and then others it's like, oh, that was so nice, you know? So trust yourself, I guess.
One thought, Colleen, that comes up, especially with folks who have mobility issues and really need a lot of help being almost lifted,
Hmm.
or a lot of physical help, changing positions, getting in and out of a shower, whatever it is. So, sort of in terms of vetting a caregiver or interviewing a caregiver, if you know that that's a need, is it okay to ask a caregiver, I don't know how you ask them about their strength, but do they have experience, and do they know the good ergonomics of helping lift people or et cetera? I guess I'm just trying to get at the physical nature of the job sometimes. How do you screen for that?
Right. Well, I think um, and I don't know that we talked about it, but Earl, when you do decide somebody needs help, you should really figure out what help they need. And then you would talk to the caregiver about that because, yeah, oh, this is a 100-pound person and they need to be moved. This is a 180-pound person and they need to be moved and they can't help.
Mhm.
So, you you need you probably actually need quite a bit of strength. I mean, and you're not supposed to need the strength because you're supposed to be able to, pivot and do all these beautiful moves that make it
Mhm.
easy for everybody, but that doesn't always work. So,
Mhm.
yeah, but I would just bluntly ask and someone will say, "Oh no, I'm so good at that," or, "Oh no, I can't do that." Because, sometimes it's good. The guy's 6'5" and he weighs, 220 pounds, and you've got this little 5-foot caregiver, probably, and he needs to be moved, probably not going to work for you too well. But on the other hand, it might, but you'd have to ask that person that's doing the moving.
Yeah, I would say in experience, there's the body habitus matchup, but I've also seen some really small caregivers do amazingly strong, be outrageously strong, and especially if they know those sort of jujitsu
Yeah.
movie. Yeah. So don't necessarily judge the book by its cover, and ask. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't. And because I have some clients will be like, I have to have a man because she has to be lifted or he has to be lifted. And it's like, well, maybe, but maybe not. You know,
And that comes up, that's fine, right? I mean, if you prefer working with a woman caregiver or a male caregiver, no, of course that's fine, right?
that's
Especially
your preference. Yeah. You can have what you want, or you should have what you want. You shouldn't be forced to, um, like if you want a man, you should have a man. If you want a woman, you should have a woman. And if you don't care, you might get a mix.
yeah.
And they all have their pros and cons.
Okay. What else, Sons?
All right, we got another one from Sarah Ann. She said, please address the important question of how to communicate with a family member who needs help and can't afford it, but is refusing it or insisting that family members provide all the care.
Hmm. Hmm.
So you're saying they need help, but they can't afford help?
They can afford it.
Oh, they can.
So
Okay.
the
Oh, yeah.
person who needs the help is saying, I want my family to do it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, and that's where the family has to um, have some boundaries and say, I want to help you in this way or that, or I want to help you. I want to be with you, but I don't want to be your caregiver. I want to be your daughter. I want to be your partner. I want to be whatever they are. That's what they want to be. And be insistent. And we need to get care in here so that I can do that. And I don't think it's easy.
Hmm.
And but I think you do have to you just have to insist. And then the problem is then you keep doing the care and then they're like, ha ha ha. It's I'm getting my way. But
Yeah.
as you find yourself circling the drain because you're so tired and your life is, just being consumed by caring for somebody. Yeah, it's worth coming up with those boundaries.
I think it's as simple and as hard as saying no and lovingly. And, and saying also that as you're pointing, like it's really magical, rhetorically and otherwise, to be able to say, no, mama, I can't do that. Um, and I can do this, or something that's not that helps with the segue to the no. But to your point, and a meta message here is you as a caregiver, you as a patient, everyone has rights here. Everyone has the rights to say yes or no. And I just think that the note around caregiving very often just it's so easy for caregivers to sort of disappear as people to the needs of the person they're serving, especially a loved one. So we don't mean to make the idea of saying no out to be easy, but it is really important. Family members who end up hurting themselves one way or another, physically, emotionally, otherwise, by doing things that they don't want to or know they shouldn't be doing, but just can't find their way to saying no.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and money is a really tricky thing. I had no idea that every human being thinks of money differently and
Mhm.
has their, their their fear to no fear factors in money, but how you explain to somebody that has so much money and they're like, I cannot afford care. I can't spend it on, and it's like, well, you're 98, you've got millions of dollars. I think you can afford care, but
Mhm.
the words don't matter. It's that
Yeah.
it's something about that. So that's one other thing that I do see people do is they decide they'll pay for the care.
Mm.
And then often it ends up coming out of the other person's money anyway, or the other person will reimburse, but
Mhm.
it's a tough one.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, just relational communication dynamics, and depending on the person asking this question, the family dynamics, maybe, it may be worth just exploring. Why, Mom, you've got the money. Why is it that you don't want to hire? Like, just explore the concerns, because maybe that'll evince a very answerable concern. Well, I can't, where are we going to find caregivers? Or whatever else. Just in other words, that note may not be taken on face value, maybe just a starter question to explore more with this person. What is the resistance? Because maybe a lot of those concerns are answerable and can be just talked through.
That's great. And also that goes back to that starting out with a little bit of care. Because if you say, okay, well, if our budget is, I don't know, $1,000 a month or something, so you get something started, and then it becomes easier to pay for because you value it.
Yeah. And if right on, and if also related, pinging here, like I can imagine a parent, I can imagine my parents saying this, like their resistance to hiring caregivers that might feel like, why, you want me to do everything? And then if I push, I could imagine my mom saying, well, it's because I don't want to spend my inheritance on me, or something like that. I'm like, Mom, whatever. So and another note to just kind of push, and you might be surprised at what's behind that resistance.
Exactly. When you've spent your whole life saving this money and then someone wants you to give it away, it's
Yeah.
like whatever it is. But I
Yeah.
love asking the question. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Colleen, both of you actually are. I've got a few more questions, so I just want to make sure it's okay to go a bit over for both of you. Okay.
Is that
Sure.
okay with you, Colleen?
Is that okay with you, Colleen?
Yes.
Wonderful,
Thank
thank you. Okay, so Karen asked, are caregivers educated on what dying looks like and or what palliative care means in a broad sense?
Yes, yes. I think there's a majority of our clients do end up going into hospice and dying. Um, so I have to say, I think that it's such a delicate thing to walk with someone as they head towards the end of their life and to be there with them and hopefully there's hospices involved or someone directing palliative care so that they can be directed to do exactly the right thing for the
Mm.
patient. So working together in tandem with the medical profession or that side of things. But yeah, and then I also have to say I have some caregivers that's all they want to do. They're like they just
Like,
want yeah, they're like any hospice cases, I'll take them. It's like, okay. Um, because it's such an honor. So,
mm. But that's an important note that hasn't come up yet, is that oftentimes it's more than okay. It's wonderful when both your work is involved in the home as well as home hospice. It's not one or the other. It's a both and.
right. One can benefit the other very, very, very much.
Yeah. And I would say from my experience of working with various caregivers over the years, most of them don't have training in end of life care per se, but they have a disposition often that is really a temperament that's well suited to the sensitivities of the end of life, and just an interest in seeing it as an honor and want to be there, or have had a lot of experience there, but maybe not necessarily training per se. Yeah.
Right. And yeah, that's a very good point because you can take classes that will tell you about it, but there's nothing like experiencing it. And the other thing is everybody does it differently. Even though it's the same overall, it's a very personal thing.
Okay. Another question from Brian. Brian asked, how do you ask for a gay male helper to assist with a gay patient?
Guess you just ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think back because I did have someone that was well, 'cause they kind of walked me around it, but they had a it was a gay client, and so of course you have to get someone in there that is cool with that, um, and that I guess I would know which one of my caregivers would be better,
Hmm.
but I think most of them would be pretty fine with it. But
Yeah, I guess in
yeah,
the, sorry to interrupt you, Colleen.
no, that's okay. I was going to say I think I only have one gay caregiver, and
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, I guess because it get tricky. Is it are there legalities around asking? I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think as the hiring patient or family, I think you can ask just about anything. The person doesn't maybe not have to answer it. But
right. Well, you can ask anything, and you find that people in their actions, if they don't like certain things or certain things happen, but um, yeah, it's subtle. So it's totally politically incorrect. I mean, around here anyway. But yeah, but if there's some way of expressing your needs to just be this is what I need, I
yeah,
mean, that's what you should do.
yeah. I'm just most comfortable with a gay male caregiver. Is that possible? You
Hmm.
don't have to necessarily explain your reasoning.
Exactly. Yeah. Is it a possibility? And if not, what would be the next best thing?
Yeah, I was going to say, I imagine that in many places that may not be a possibility just because the agency may not have someone that, they know is that person that they identify as that and want to do that, or there just aren't hired people. So it would be more what, Colleen, to your point, what would be the next best thing if we can't do that? What is best for you after that? What kind of conversation would maybe be had so you can make sure that you're comfortable with that person? So I
Right.
imagine that might be a hard, kind of a difficult one to make happen every time.
Yeah. Where's the line and what can we do to make it work?
Hmm.
All right.
And the other thing I guess I would do is I would probe a little further to see what it is they want that they think that they can only get from that
Mm,
person.
mm.
Because chances are there's other people with that could do it too.
Hmm.
Cool.
Stones, anything more out there?
No, we got through all the questions. Colleen, thank you so much. Karen said she's charmed by you, and I agree. So thank you so
Yeah,
much
yeah,
for
you know
for
that.
being here and discussing all of this with us. It was really helpful.
Oh, you're welcome. And please, anybody, feel free to call me. I love to talk about this. It's what I do. So,
So friggin' good at it, Colleen. Thank you again for this and for all the things you've done for us and our clients over the years. And that's note you're ending on, which is so beautiful. And anyone out there looking for caregivers or support, the vibe that Colleen's putting out there, like you want to make it work. It's not just a bunch of prohibitions and you can get very creative because you want to make it work. And it's just a beautiful spirit. And I would encourage anyone out there to look for that spirit in anyone you're working with.
exactly. And pace yourself and take care of yourself.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good way to end it. Thank you so much, Colleen. Thank you,
Thank
BJ.
you.
Thanks everyone for being here.
Guys.
Happy weekend, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.